Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about the new movie, Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer is directed by one of my favorite directors, Christopher Nolan, so I had to go check this movie out. The synopsis of this movie is that it's based on the book American Prometheus, which is a biography of Oppenheimer, who is the physicist responsible for working on the Manhattan Project with a team of scientists. And it comes with all the struggles and moral implications that come along with that. So without further ado, let's get into the 6 things that make a movie great. 1. The plot. This is the story of Oppenheimer and his crucial role in the Manhattan Project. But what this film uses as a true north is Oppenheimer being in front of a special council determining whether or not he's a loyal citizen of the United States. While you're fixed on this moment in time, there's many flashbacks that start telling stories of the past. There's a couple moments flashing forward to the future, and there's a few more moments in the present or near present that all go into telling the story of Oppenheimer and the building of the bomb. And while I don't mind that storytelling technique, especially when it's in the hands of Christopher Nolan, I have to say that for me, this movie is in 2 parts. The first half of this movie is extremely choppy. It felt like a lot of the scenes were less than a minute or a minute and a half long. And when you're jumping between a bunch of different places, whether they're past, present, or future, involving a bunch of different people that you don't know the names of yet, and there's not a tangible sense of timeline other than what you can gather in passing from all of these very quickly slotted scenes, it can be difficult to comprehend what's going on. But once you reach the halfway point, this movie is amazing. While it still maintains that same idea of jumping between past, present, and future in different places and different parts of the timeline, the scenes are longer, you seem to know the characters more, and the emotional depth that you get to in the second half of this film is amazing. I didn't expect to feel as much as I did in this movie for Oppenheimer and the things that he was experiencing, but with the way that Nolan tells this story, you feel it deeply at the end of the film. And the way that this movie ends is very much the signature of Christopher Nolan, and it worked so well in this movie. Even though it ended very well, I have to give plot a 50-50. 2 is family friendliness. Oppenheimer is rated R. Now I know there's been a lot of talk about this area of the movie, so let me be frank. There's probably 10 or less F words, but the only other reason why this movie is rated R is for the nude scenes. There are only a couple scenes in this movie that have nudity. Most of it is sexual nudity, and despite what a lot of people are saying online, just like any other film, it doesn't help tell the story. All it does is show that there is a sexual relationship between Oppenheimer and Jean. And there's even a moment during one of those scenes where they crop it so you just see Florence Pugh's character from her shoulders up, and they could have done that the entire scene. It was not essential to the storytelling, and it was almost the sole reason why this movie was pushed to the R rating. So while I personally was disappointed, objectively, family friendliness gets a thumbs down. 3 is acting and script. This movie is chock full of A-list actors, and you'd expect nothing less at this point in Nolan movies. Everybody wants to be a part of them because they're so well done. Cillian Murphy is excellent as Oppenheimer, and I also really liked Matt Damon as General Groves. I love Robert Downey Jr., but his acting role in this movie is not really brought to fruition until the end, and at that point, it's really well done. If there's anything I had to say about the acting is that sometimes it can feel like the actors' performances aren't as good as they are in other movies, but I attribute that to there being a plethora of A-list actors to the point where you don't get to see them act at the capacity they normally do. And it kind of creates this idea that you're not getting enough from them because you usually see more from them, but in my opinion, the acting was great. And I thought the script of this movie was very great as well. It seemed like every interaction, every moment of dialogue had deep meaning behind it, as well as many subtle moments written into the film that hold very strong meaning. So for me, acting and script get a thumbs up. 4 is character development. Most of the character development that you get in this movie is seeing the character of Oppenheimer. Who he is at the beginning of the movie, the middle of the movie, and the end of the movie. You really go on a nice character journey where some really tough and deep things are tackled. There are so many different characters in this movie that not all of them get character development, but even some of the minor roles like Emily Blunt's character and Florence Pugh's character get lots of subtle character development, whether it's a flask and a purse, whether it's a single line of dialogue that if you're not listening you'll miss. He builds character development in subtle ways so well that it feels like you know these characters enough to know who they are, even though the movie doesn't spend a ton of time developing them. That's a sign of a master director, and I love that about this movie. I also love the character arc that you see Louis Strauss go on. time, because the groundwork is laid in the first half of the film, but you don't really get to see it come to fruition until the second half, and I was really surprised. There were times in some characters that were not as developed as I'd hoped they'd be, but the movie focused on what it needed to, and that subtle character development is just so rare and incredible that I have to give character development a thumbs up. 5 is visuals and CGI. The fact that there is no CGI in this movie is a huge achievement. Nolan is able to film this in a way that focuses on micro explosions looking like absolutely huge explosions. It's really awesome, and you can't tell in the slightest. I also really enjoyed the dynamic of some scenes being shot in black and white, and just the way that this movie used its visuals to tell a story, again with subtle details, but also talking about past, present, and future. So for me, visuals and CGI get a thumbs up. And 6 is rewatchability. Oppenheimer is 3 hours long, but you do not feel it. And I think that's due to 2 things primarily. 1 is that the story is just very interesting and compelling. 2 is that the score of this movie is incredible. I don't know if there's a moment in this movie that actually doesn't have music underneath of it, but I think there is a constant score playing underneath the film, at least for the entire second half of it. And it's like a slow build until the very, very end that makes the movie not feel as long as it is. There are a couple things in this movie that I've talked about already that challenge my ability to want to rewatch it. So for me, rewatchability gets a 50-50. With all these areas considered, I have to give Oppenheimer a 7.5 out of 10. The first half of this movie was extremely choppy and at times difficult to follow. In addition to that, the nudity in this movie is completely unnecessary and takes away from the film. But the second half of this movie was absolutely incredible. The storytelling was fantastic, the character arcs and development were very well done. The amount of subtle details in the script, the character development, the storytelling were second to none. And the way that this movie ends on an emotional front is extremely impactful and ends in an incredible Christopher Nolan way. This is definitely one of the best historical dramas that I have ever seen. And while it wasn't perfect, I found myself enjoying it greatly. So with all that in mind, if you're an enjoyer of very long films, and you either like Christopher Nolan or you like historical dramas, you might want to go check out Oppenheimer in theaters. Thank you so much for watching. If you've seen Oppenheimer, please let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. As always, I appreciate your love and support, and I'll catch you guys and gals in the next one.